Hey guys, my guest today is Jason Gleaves, and we're going to be discussing UFOs and alien encounters. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks, find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everyone, and happy Halloween. I hope you're all collecting your candy and dressing up and having your little parties or whatever, and you're listening to this show because we got a great show tonight. We are talking unidentified flying objects, or UAPs. I'm old school, so it's UFO. But anyway, my guest tonight, Jason Gleason, has some really cool stories to tell, and he has several books out on the subject. So it's gonna be a fun night. My name is Charlotte, and I will be your host for the next hour. I am also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal issue, we can get to you. Somebody is available, and if we're not that close to you, we're maybe 3 or 4 counties away, so we can get to you. So look us up on Facebook, look us up on YouTube, look us up everywhere. We're everywhere on the web. And that reminds me, if you are watching from YouTube today, there's a little ghost in the bottom right-hand corner. If you click on that little ghost, that will subscribe you to our channel, and our channel's got nearly 450 videos sitting over there, and they're all different topics, because I just don't cover paranormal topics. I'm a journalist, photojournalist by trade, so I like to vary things, so you're going to see different stuff, and I think there's something there for everybody, even kids, yeah. Okay, if you're watching from Facebook today, be sure to follow. We're looking for followers. We're building up our following, and every day is better and better and better and better. If you're listening via RSS feed, please share this with your friends. Because I know there's a bunch of you guys out there, so share this with your friends. You guys are really doing well with building this up. Okay? And if you're watching from TikTok, I'm going to let you know who I am. California Haunts, all lowercase on TikTok. Instagram, I'm Ghosty Gal. Facebook, California Haunts Ghostly Events. Or you can look me up, just my name. Okay? But anyway, I want to welcome everybody. We've got a great show lined up for you today, and I'm looking forward to interviewing this gentleman. So without further ado, let me bring him in.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Sir, tell me about you.
Well, ufology is really my thing. It's my discipline, if you call it that. I got into ufology probably when I first had a sighting with my sister when I was 7 years old in Liverpool, UK. We were playing in a relative's house upstairs, quite innocently, and we both witnessed and saw a silver disc-shaped object hovering outside the bedroom window. Unusual. We'd not seen anything like it before. UFOs hadn't even come into our reality, our own time zone as such by then. We both witnessed it, and then it took off at high velocity and went on its merry way, and we just carried on playing as if nothing had happened. And it was only till many years later when I got into ufology, into more detail, 2014, in more depth of the research side. My sister actually approached me and said, "Do you remember when we saw that UFO outside the window?" And I'd forgotten, completely gone out of my mind, And it slowly came back, and she said, "Do you remember when we saw it and what we saw and unusual, etc." So that was really what pulled me into ufology, got me on this journey of high strangeness, as we call it. And I'd start to watch TV shows on the TV, because in the 1970s, when this first sighting happened, you've got to remember ufology, the only things you saw sci-fi were in the pictures. You went to the movies.
Mm-hmm.
You probably had likes of Doctor Who on the TV and stuff like that. And I'd started watching Arthur C. Clarke. He had a TV show out there, Strange World. He covered all kinds of paranormal, Bigfoot, ghosts. You name it was on the show. UFO. So I was glued to that every week. And I was always nagging my parents to take me down to the library to get the latest books out, the Eric Van Daniken's Chariot to the Gods. And
Mm-hmm.
I had an appetite for books and I went through everything. And I actually call that now, I laugh about it now, but I call it the Richard Dreyfuss syndrome. You know, the character out of Close Encounters, where everybody goes through that. He has that sighting in the movie, and then everybody goes through that mad, I want this information, I've got to have that information, you know, and you just go on a mad journey, don't you, you know, looking for stuff. And then obviously going through all those sort of things. And then later I joined the Air Force in my older life. And there was an experience we had at RAF Cosford in the UK, which is Birmingham, Wolverhampton area, so it's central England, you know, where it is. Mm-hmm. And basically this camp it's a training camp for the Air Force. So when airmen and, you know, when they pass out from their basic training, they'll go there and they'll become, you know, an armourer or communications. You know, they'll learn their discipline within the Air Force, you know, from that base. And then, but on that base, there's a large museum as well. So in that museum, there's probably every single first type of aircraft the Air Force has had. You know, first supersonic, the first Harrier, first helicopter, you know, anything like that. And part of the duties for all the airmen and etc., you know, at the camp was part of gate guard duty. They had to do guard duty and things like that. And in March of 1993, I was on the base. So a good friend of mine was an orderly corporal in the guard room that evening. Everything was normal. There was a young airman stationed on one of the guard posts of the airfield, which wasn't that far from the guard post. And late in the evening, the radio kicked into life, and it was this young airman screaming down the radio, "Get the guard commander out to the airfield because something big's over the airfield, and I don't know what it is." And, you know, obviously he was frightened, scared. So the guard commander, the RAF police, and all the personnel got in their Land Rovers, etc., and got out to the airfield as soon as possible. And when they got there, they all witnessed this huge black triangle-shaped UFO hovering over the airfield. Mm-hmm. It was hovering there for quite a while, and then it took off at high velocity, and then went to another nearby RAF station, RAF Shawbury, which is about 20 miles away from Cosford. And the on-duty air traffic controller, radar, etc., and the Met Office there, you know, they actually saw an object of similar description. I'm assuming it's the same craft, but, you know, we have to say it's sort of. Mm-hmm. And it was coming over the airfield there, zigzagging across the airfield and unusual manoeuvres, and firing very thin laser pencil lasers down towards the ground. And the impression they got there, the personnel at Shawbury, they thought it was looking for something. That was the impression they got. And then it took off at high velocity. But throughout the UK that evening, it was witnessed, or a craft again of similar description was witnessed by on-duty policemen, members of the public, and then, you know, so it was all, you know, quite documented as well, with also the British Ministry of Defence released the papers a few years back, so it's all out there for anybody who wants to look it up. You know, it did happen, and all the reports are there of what the policemen and the officers, etc., all put forward. So yeah, really my life has had a lot of ups and downs, strange happenings, unexplained happenings. My family members have had strange things. You know, my father's had man in black experiences, and, you know, it just goes on and on and on in that respect. And then I started to start analysing pictures and footage, basically of what I used to read many years ago, when I first got into ufology, and the cases that actually interested me and got me, you know, down this path. And I would just start to analyze them, and then I put them onto Facebook, and then people would, you know, look at them and give me their opinions, etc. Mm-hmm. I'd debunk a few along the way and things like that. And then people would start to contact me more and more, saying, "Can you analyze these images of, this UFO I've seen or this piece of footage?" And it sort of grew from there. And I've analysed stuff for people from all over the world. They approach me, I'll analyse it and put it out there, for them. Either give them it back if they don't want their name forward, bring him forward into the public domain. I won't, keep the privacy for them. But if they want me to post it, I will do, and I'll just put it as I found it, my opinions, etc. And that's really where it's gone from. And then the books came from that, through my publisher, Philip Mantle, who's a ufologist over here in the UK, really well known. And he's really, been my mentor along the way, bringing out the books. He just approached me one day and said, why don't you write a book? And I was like, well, I've never wrote a book before. And basically helped me along the way of everything, how to write and, get it down to what I did. So the first book I actually produced was a book called UFO Photo. That's the book there.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, that's the first book I wrote. And in that book, there's actually cases. As you can see on the cover, there's the famous Battle of Los Angeles case. And in the book itself, I actually analysed the original photograph, that actual image with the spotlights are on the UFO craft. And, you can see it's an unusual looking craft. It's not an airplane. It's not a helicopter. It's nothing like that. And you got to remember at the time when that happened in the early 40s, America had just come into the Second World War. So they were on high alert. They thought it was either the Japanese or the German Luftwaffe bombing Los Angeles at the time, and 20-odd thousand people witnessed that object. So, I went down the road of those sorts of cases, analysed them, put them into categories so people could see how I analysed them, etc. And went down those roads. And then the second book I wrote was the Ufology Umbrella. And that was really going into a separate part of ufology, because ufology is built up and made up of so many different, categories and segments. And really, that's why I see it, Ufology Umbrella, the rain will cascade down and go off in many different directions of ufology. We're talking about abduction, sightings, craft, animal mutilation, the list goes on and on and on. Right. So I wanted to actually go into the depths of the categories, and people mainly know the categories as CE1, CE2, CE3, which is close encounters. And 1-2 was Dr. Hynek. I'm sure your listeners have heard of Dr. Hynek. And he actually came out with those two first, categories, which was basically if you have a sighting of UFO or aerial phenomena, that's C1. C2 is where, crop circles, terrain damage, cattle mutilations, down that road. And then C3 was really a category that came out when the film came out, Close Encounters, the Spielberg movie. And Dr. Hynek did actually have a cameo role within that movie as well. But that was really a visual, sighting, and it was really to do with the movie. So it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And then there is Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, which is human abduction, because again, ufology is constantly changing. It's expanding all the time. It never stays in one place. I'd say that, so that's why the reason for the categories growing in numbers, from 1, 2, 3, and we got 4, where people started talking about abductions by ETs, extraterrestrials, down that road. Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, people like that, Calvin Parker, Charlie Hickson, so people wanted to know. It had to be pigeonholed into a category, because humans are like, we like to pigeonhole things, don't we? C5 is really what most people talk about now, days as such, where you've got the likes of Stephen Greer and other people where they go out and have contact with ETs. So that's an interaction between ETs themselves, backwards and forwards. That can be either way, from the ET to the human, or the human to the ET. Different ways. In that respect. CE6 is probably a bit more one we don't like to talk about, where a UFO or anything related phenomena causes death or injury to a human being. So the only reason I say that is the witnesses that have come forward for the crash retrieval of UFOs, etc. Over the past, they've talked about when they've gone on board craft, they've retrieved human body parts, etc. So, there's obviously some sort of foul play going on there. And C7 is probably the most controversial of all, really, with everyone talking about hybrids and, that type of thing where, where humans have intercourse with ETs, to produce a hybrid being. So, that's 1 to 7. And that was the second book. That was really, I wanted people to see a different side of ufology, just like I did, as I've rolled my sleeves up, got in there, and come up with a different side of ufology. And then the third book, UFO Encounters Up Close and Personal. This one is different again, because over the years I've been in ufology and I've analysed images and footage for people all over the world, that I've actually got to know an awful lot of people within ufology, and I've asked them, how did they get into ufology? I wanted to know what pulled them into this, realm of, strangeness. And, was it a sighting? Was it an experience or something related to that? And I was really humbled because the amount of people that came forward, there's over 50 different people within that book of present day ufology who have actually, taken the time to give me how they got into ufology and how, that they basically, where they are today. So yeah, that's about it, really.
Now I have a question. You were seeing things as a child and throughout your life. Do you think there's any chance that you've been abducted?
Yeah, I do. I have never been regressed or anything like that, and I've thought about it on and off, and then either I've been too busy, to do anything. I have spoken to Mary Rodwell, who does, regressions for people. I regard her very highly, in the field. And yeah, I do believe at some point I've had the interactions with. I still see craft now. I can still go outside and see, but then that's not unique just to me. A lot of people will approach me and say, "Oh, I really want to see a UFO. I've never seen a UFO, and it'll never happen to me." And I said, "No, that's not true. If you go outside, you don't have to be anywhere special. You can be outside in your own garden, your own backyard, etc., or just a private place, and look up. If you feel open enough in yourself, etc., and they feel, you're ready to see a craft or something very similar, you will see something. It's not a unique thing to people. You're not special if you do see a craft, etc. If you just go out there and look, just like the research, I say to people, don't always take what I have wrote or looked up or researched as gospel, etc. Get in there and do the research yourself, because it's all there. You will find things out for yourself, and then when you find it out, then that becomes your truth, then, doesn't it?
Now, going back to your sighting when you were in the military, years and years before that, wasn't there? I remember reading about a UFO case over in the UK where one had
Don't
crashed or something like that.
You're probably talking about Rendlesham Forest.
Yes.
Yeah, that was in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And that was basically over within a woods close to RAF Woodbridge, and it was Rendlesham Forest. was the local woods where the incident really happened. And it was Colonel Holt and, a couple of other personnel. And it was over 3 days, I think, it happened, 3 separate different sightings over evenings. And it was basically within the wood itself. It was a very famous case because it made the front of newspapers, etc., here in the UK. And Colonel Holt, who I've had, the pleasure of meeting a few years back in the UK when he came over for a conference, the Outer Limits conference here in the UK. And he gave a great speech on what happened that night and, where he went. He actually had a handheld recorder and was like dictating what he'd seen while he was there. You can actually hear it. If you go online, you'll hear the tape live. They saw lights, etc. And again, it's a strange case because it just carries on. Something definitely happened. Whether it was extraterrestrial, whether it was secret covert downcraft, there's lots of explanations out there. And it'll always carry on in that respect because it's such a big UK case. Cosford was a big case, with the triangle coming down over the base and being seen. But, throughout the UK, there are an awful lot of UFO hotspots, as we call them, where just like in the States, you have them over there, like Mount Adams, the SETI Ranch, etc., Mount Shasta, and, Mexico, Brazil. All these places are real big hotspots for UFOs. So, yeah, it's just one of many, many cases, that has been really researched into, and it'll never stop being a big case over here anyway.
When you think about, I heard you talk about World War II and some of these other wars. The pilots, if I remember the stories right, a lot of the pilots thought that these things that they were seeing were like specialized weapons from the other side.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's what I was saying before with that famous sighting. The Battle of Los Angeles, it's called, isn't it? Early 1940s, and again, this thing come over Los Angeles itself. You can see the actual searchlights on it. It stayed hovering. They fired 20-odd thousand, munition, artillery shots at this thing. Hit it and everything. It didn't even move. It didn't. People were actually killed during that sighting as well. People had heart attacks and all kinds. With it going. 20,000 people witnessed this thing. But again, like you just said, with them just coming into Second World War, they were only about 3 months into the actual, coming in as the Allies with the British, etc. They thought it was the German Luftwaffe or the Japanese who were about to bomb Los Angeles. So they were going to throw everything at this thing, weren't they? Again, and didn't bring it down.
Well, you can kind of think that way, see how they saw that way because the Germans did come up with the first jet. So when these things are zipping around, that's your first thought is, the Germans came up with, with a new craft.
Well, they give them the nickname Foo Fighters, didn't they? That was what they did. They didn't know what they were. They were like orb-shaped objects that would follow the formations of bombers onto bombing runs and then back again, and and they, in the end, they sort of got not friendly with them, but they became accustomed to them because they knew they would be there, but they would never attack. They would never. They're obviously observing whatever they were, the bombing aircraft, but they did give him that nickname, Foo Fighters. So,
do you think that the governments, now that people are seeing a lot more of these things, do you think that they're government built, or do you think it's something from another world?
I think there's an awful lot of secret covert technology out there, that is not being seen yet by the public. It probably will do, probably not too far away, I would have thought. I only have to look back. I was part of Desert Storm when I was in the Air Force, the first, attack, war in Iraq, if you call it that. And the first time I ever saw the stealth bomber, the F-17 stealth bomber, that was the first time I saw that, which was the early 90s. And again, if you saw that aircraft, it's nothing like what we've got. It's triangular, diamond shaped. It's very unique. You think, how does that fly? And it just stands out like a sore thumb, doesn't it? So I really do think there's an awful lot of technology out there. I would say, like the triangle shaped craft, I would say 90% of those sort of a craft are secret covert. And again, they're the perfect cover story for the military, etc. Because if somebody comes forward and says, I've seen a UFO, just not knowing what the object was, the government can turn around and say, well, we don't know what it was. It was a UFO. So it's the perfect cover story for them. But I do believe, there's an awful lot. But then there is the small percentage, again, of craft that we don't know. They're probably multi-dimensional in origin. And again, I go back to when I started in ufology. I'm ex-Air Force, ex-British Aerospace. I used to build the Airbus passenger airplane wings. So I was always under the impression everything like this was, if it wasn't nuts and bolts, it wasn't real. It had to be a real object.
Right.
But over time within ufology, my opinions changed so vastly. You've got to realize that these things are multidimensional. We've got to think outside the box. They're not what we think are, a nuts and bolts type of a craft. There's witnesses that have come forward, and I've got images where, the craft is actually morphing into different shapes. It's actually changing shape, and I do believe it's got an awful lot to do with frequencies as well. It's to do with the frequency. And the way I explain that is, if people take a photograph and they send it to me and they say, well, when I took the photograph, there was nothing in the photograph. There was just the person or the view or wherever I was taking it of. But when I look back later, there was a UFO in the shot. Well, the camera can pick up a different frequency to what the human eye can see.
Right.
The human eye can only see in a very short field of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is huge. The human eye is a very, very thin corridor. Outside that corridor, we're talking radio waves and microwaves and infrared, ultraviolet, gamma rays. We can't see those. But cameras and equipment and things can see that. They're in a different frequency. And that's the way I see UFOs. They're actually in a stealth type of frequency that we can't see them, or certain people can see them. And again, does that come under, like musicians and people who can read music and down that sort of a road where, they're adapt to different frequencies. They can read music. I mean, I can't read music to save my life, but I know people that can. And, it's amazing the tunes they can come out with. And, and again, it's just a different version of frequency, etc. And that's really what we've got to get our heads around with the multi-dimensional craft that we see out there. They're coming through in a different frequency, that they're probably already, in the same plane as us, but on a different frequency. And people do say that with multiverses and things. So we definitely got to start thinking outside the box. That's what I'm trying to say there,
Well, I can attest to the thing with the stealth fighter, and that I live, near a former base here in here in the U.S., and the base was a repair area, so they would bring those things in at night. And when you see them go over at night, because you can't see them, all you see are the lights. I mean, you would think if somebody didn't know what they were, that they were UFOs they were watching.
Well, that is a UFO, isn't it? Because it's an unidentified flying object.
Yeah.
Until it's identified, it's always going to be an unidentified, isn't it? So, there are so many different types. You've got the larger bomber, the delta wing bombers,
right?
And they just stand out like nothing we've got. And you think, how does that stay in the air? And I'm sure, there's an awful lot more out there that is actually still under the radar. We can't see it, things like that. And yeah, it's just explanation, isn't it, to it?
Absolutely. What is there a common thread that you see with these sightings?
Not really. I get approached by a lot of people, obviously, constantly analysing. The only sort of a thread I could probably put to it is, but it's not really a thread. It's just through the different decades, the different types of UFOs that have been witnessed. So if you go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you've got the different shapes of craft. You got obviously the original is going to be your disc-shaped craft, which is your traditional flying saucer, etc. But then you've got elongated craft, you've got cylindrical, cigar-shaped, which are huge again. Circular, oval, square. You've got every sort of shape under the sun. I actually do an awful lot of analysing for a good friend of mine, Peter Slattery in Australia. He part of the SETI Ranch in Australia, just like James Gilliland is for the SETI Ranch near Mount Adams. And the footage they send me of the different shapes of craft and, the orbs, and probably more up-to-date sightings that I get are orbs. People seem to be, that is the latest, that we're still getting the other shaped objects, but we're getting more of the orbs. And if you look at the footage I've analysed, of those two gentlemen, and all the stuff I've actually analysed for them is on their web pages. If you go on, it's all there free. Anyone can look at them, and it's amazing. Some of the, the footage. I think it's eseti.org. If you go onto those sites, and you can see the craft coming in from above, different angles, zigzagging across the sky. No conventional aircraft does that. A helicopter might. Drones obviously might. Larger drones, but then. These craft come in and they're actually, it's a bright light as such, or a group of lights. And then part of, like we were saying before, CE5, which is a form of communication with ETs, and that, it comes in and it'll power up. We call it powering up. So it goes really, really bright and then it fades off again. And that is a form of communication with that object or craft. But then Peter Slattery, I joke with saying I'm sure he goes to bed with his camera because he goes everywhere with his camera. He takes photographs of craft, beings, especially the beings. I've done quite a few for him there. I actually recently did a documentary with him and James and Mary Rodwell called Multidimensional. I think that's on Amazon Prime and iTunes, etc. And that goes into Pete's life and the sightings and just the sheer volume of, objects he's photographed and the beings, where he put up a motion camera within his house. A bit like they do, when people go on the ghost hunting, they'll have a motion camera, and he was having sightings within his house. So he set up this motion camera and you can actually see where there's a wall down and there's a grey ET sticking its head round the corner like this and then popping back. And then there was another time where he actually, I think I was speaking with him either just before and he said, hang on, and he got a photograph. He had footprints going over the roof of where the building he was in. Went outside, as he does, he just photographs everything. Went outside and he caught this grey, your typical grey with the large elongated black eyes, your typical grey.
Right.
Photographed this grey standing, peering above behind the bonnet of his car. It's amazing footage. And if you actually go on and look at their and what they've got and what they're taking and putting out there. And there's different types of, the Palladian beings that have manifested themselves within his house. They're more of the Nordic type of being, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed that people speak about. So there's so much out there, really, that you've only got to look. You do your research, you can find an awful lot of stuff out.
Do you think that that the hybrids are living among us?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Just to the sheer fact that they're interacting, whether it's a learning curve for them or part of the programming or whatever it is, I don't know. But my opinion is they're here to learn, they're here to interact, and eventually there'll be so many of them within the humanity and within the population, it becomes normal. Things like that. And then go back to a friend of mine. Off the top of my head, I can't remember his name, but he was actually in a restaurant, and he actually would, in his head, if he saw an unusual looking person, in his head, he would actually say to them, do a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
So this time it was a female, I think, in a queue, waiting to queue up some food in like a canteen. And he said, if you're not from here, touch your nose. And this female went like this in front of him and just put her, and then afterwards he was sat at the table and she came up to the table, not invited or anything. And I can't remember what she actually said to him, something, but it was like off the cuff. It was like completely what he was saying. So, I really do, like you just said, I do believe that they're interacting, they're within our population and observing.
I find it interesting to think that way because you think about all this. At some point, supposedly, the government's going to tell us the truth about all this, and maybe my thoughts have always been that they could be living across the street from us, and it's all a prep thing, so that when the disclosure does come out, no one's running around tearing their hair out like in the movies because you're already used to these people.
That's it, yeah. But with disclosure, I mean, I say this as well to people. They say, "Oh, when is disclosure going to happen? When's the big question and etc." And I say, "Well, no, disclosure's already happened. It's already happened. Just to the sheer volume of sightings and cases and stuff we've got out there that is, I believe, is genuine. 100% genuine, in my opinion." So I always say to people, you can't rely on waiting for a government to come forward and give you information when, they've spent so many years keeping it from you. So.
Absolutely. Do you think of this, like you say, with disclosure, that it's already happened? But do you think it's going to happen in a really, really big way at some point?
I think, I do think the governments, they've got no option. They've got no option because they've already started doing the drip. I call it a drip feed effect. They're slowly giving you little pieces of information, like we've, all of a sudden we found life on Mars, we found water, things like that. It wasn't that long ago that the Pope actually said he would baptize extraterrestrials. Why would he say that? It's all little tiny things that they're slowly, and I say it's little tiny things. The US government have just released all the Tic Tac footage, and videos, and it's all coming out. I mean, I know the videos they've released are really, really poor quality. They have got much better in their archives, etc. Why release such poor quality? But it's all part of the drip feed effect. Getting this stuff out. Eventually they'll come out with it on the news, and Joe Blogs next door will just, be blasé about it. Another piece of information. It's just like, the way it goes. But disclosure's definitely already happened. It's just because of the sheer. I mean, I know for the fact that in my personal archive of images I've done, I probably got 100,000 plus images of UFOs and different types of things that I've analysed, and some that I've proved that are not UFOs or cases, etc. But there is still a very small percentage that I believe really is, real.
Why do you think there are certain places that are hot spots and certain places that aren't?
That could be just down to geographic, that could be down to ley lines, throughout the world, the power lines that they have. I actually live on a ley line here in the UK. It's a small village, but there's a lot of history here. It's got a monastery, and it's really, really old. But then you look at the hotspots within, the UK, just everywhere in general. The ley lines probably cross over. It's probably got an awful lot to do with it, I would say so. Again, could be to do with populations. More people in a certain area will witness something. If they want to be seen, craft want to be seen. Like Brazil or Mexico, really dense populations. And they're straightforward. They'll just put it straight on the national TV, what they see. Not like the US, the British, where they'll keep it to the back and not really show or give the information out.
But you're right, Brazil's really been open with it. I remember even as a kid, getting books on the subject, and it was all about these creatures showing up at birthday parties in Brazil.
Yeah. But they're very upfront. The French are like that too. The Belgians not long ago. This is not long before the Cosford incident. The triangle I was speaking about before. The Belgians had a case. It's called they had the triangle shaped craft with their F-16 was following it, and they had camera footage the same, but they went on national TV with it. So there's only certain nations within the world that don't like to give you the information. And the only thing I say, the likes of the US, where they're not coming forward with this information, to everybody, there's a reason for it, because of covert, craft and things like that they're not out to the public.
Do you think too that people have grown to accept it more? Because like with ghost hunting, when I first started ghost hunting 20 odd years ago, people used to keep it real secret. Oh yeah, I think I've got some in my house, and now they're like, oh yeah, I've got some. It's great. Come on in. You can talk to my ghost. You think the same thing happened with the UFO thing?
Yeah, definitely. I say it's all under the same umbrella. Paranormal, ufology. It's very, very close knit with the unusual, strange happenings that are happening with all these things related. Again, I try to go to as many conferences and things that I can do, with the time limit and restraints that I have. But when I go to them, if I only 5 years ago, the caliber of person that would go to these conferences, they're great people. You talk about sightings, talking about paranormal activity, ghosts, everything you can think of that interests us all. It does interest everybody. And you go and the sort of person you're going to speak to when you go to them. But it's changed so much over the last few years, probably since the Tic Tac and the Nemesis, the US government, etc., what they brought forward.
Right.
But the caliber of person that has changed going to these conferences now, they're not the old tinfoil hat brigade, as we used to call them. You've got solicitors, you've got bankers, you've got doctors, people of higher esteem, within job wise. They would go to these things now. It's completely changed. People are openly talking about, well, I saw this. I remember having this experience, or my Uncle Joe gave this story many years ago that he saw a UFO, and it's only been within the family. And, so it's more acceptable nowadays with everything else, and especially the paranormal in general,
When you talk about researching, for your books, how hard is it to find the information?
Well, it depends if you're looking for a certain type of thing to write about, because again, like I said before, there's so many different avenues you can go down in ufology, from abduction to mutilations to sightings to craft to beings. You can pick a certain, different topic, and you can write 100 books on that, but then other people will talk about their interactions with nuclear weapons, what happens when people are taken on board, the messages they're given, and they'll write about what they're told. So if it depends what you're writing on. The books I've wrote on, I've got to know an awful lot of people, so I've already got an awful lot of information and a wealth of information from people, what I need to know, But like Philip Mantle writes books on everything, right the way through. Peter Robinson over here he does an awful lot of paranormal ghost, that type of thing. He'll write about that, but then he'll also write about UFOs and ufology and things and UFO cases. So we're quite lucky within the community because there's a lot of people coming forward or already, I've got cases out there, so it's easier than it probably was years ago when you had to write a letter to somebody and you wait for the correspondence, when nowadays you've got the internet and everything's pretty instant. So yeah, I'd say it's easier.
And which case, you've written the 3 books, which case stands out most in your mind?
In the first book, when I covered the case there from, it was an Argentinian pilot who contacted me in 2014, and he didn't want his name brought out or put out there. Yeah, it's in that book there. I don't know if you can see on the front cover. There's not one on the front cover, but anyway, it was an Argentinian pilot, civilian pilot. He was flying like he does many times. He'd seen UFOs before, but never had a camera or anything with him on board to record these. But this time he knew he was going to see UFOs again. So he had a mobile phone with him. And 2014, it was probably the earlier days of having a camera on your mobile phone. It was okay, but it wasn't brilliant. And good enough, he was flying along and he saw 2 UFOs coming in from his port side, his left-hand side. If anybody wants to watch the video, it's on my Facebook page, Ufonly, or it's on my YouTube channel. It's been on numerous TV shows, Paranormal Caught on Camera. I think I'm on the first episode of the 2nd series. It's on there. Japanese TV have had it and everything, but you can see his view from the camera. You can see straight out in front of him. You can see the cockpit. You can see the front windscreen, the propeller going around. You can see that very, very clear. You can see blue sky. You can see the cloud base. He's probably about 10,000 feet up. And like I said, from his port side, 2 UFOs he saw coming in, and he knew they were going to come right in front of his aircraft. And this large, elongated craft, probably cigar shaped, as we would say, buzzed right in front of his aircraft. And then it was followed by a smaller craft, unusual, squarish, rectangular shaped. And then it went off, shot off. He carried on flying, but was still filming forwards. And then to his starboard side, his right-hand side, he could see these 2 that went into a formation, a figure of 8. And then they came back again in a tight formation and then buzzed his aircraft again. And I personally still think to this day it's one of the best pieces of footage out there. Anyone wants to go and see it, go and have a look on my Facebook page. It's all there. I've analysed it. I've slowed the footage down. You can actually see where I've analysed each craft, and these are hundreds of feet in size. They buzzed, a civilian aircraft, military aircraft. If they did it by accident, they'd only do it once. They wouldn't come back and buzz the aircraft again. Right. And he knew because he'd seen. And it's up there. It's definitely up there with the sightings, and that I believe is genuine.
Do you think these craft can fly interdimensionally, which is why we don't see them all the time?
Yeah, yeah. Like I said before, we've got to start thinking outside the box with
Right.
this craft or these type of craft. They're not nuts and bolts, even though they might be, but they've got the technology to go interdimensional, in and out.
Mm-hmm.
Also, where people have sent me images of orbs, which are more the more modern phenomena of UFOs, if you call it that. When I've actually gone in and analysed the orbs within great detail and used filters and everything, you can see faces and shapes of beings within the orbs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I believe they're a form of transportation for them. It's basically like them looking through a window back into our reality from their reality, a multi-dimensional shift, whatever you want to call it. Everything is everyone's opinion. But I've seen things, and you come to your own sort of conclusions as you go along the way. But yeah, I do believe that's how they travel through dimensions, vast distances. They might not even travel vast distances. They might literally jump from one dimension to another, which is basically within our dimension. It's just over each other. They're all multi dimensions, and they're just going through different layers.
Well, after reading the Mojave incident, I got to thinking about what I do as a ghost hunter, and I got to thinking that maybe we're not hunting for ghosts. Maybe it's aliens, because when you read that book, they're able to walk through walls and stuff, just like a ghost is, and show up as shadows and all this. So maybe there's a connection there, between what people seem to think are ghosts and these aliens.
Yeah, well, you say that. Yeah, I totally believe that. That it's all under the same. Everything is under there. Ghosts, ETs. Because of the manifestations that we get. And the way people have said beings manifest themselves. I mean, my father, he's an ex-military guy himself, very proud, etc. He knows what I do with the ufology. He knows, down those. And one day I was sat down having a beer with him quite innocently, and he came out with the story. He said, when I was young, he said, in Liverpool in the 1950s, he said, I was playing in your nan's house, your grandparents. And it was before everybody had TVs, he just had radios in the house. It was before that sort of a time. So in the evening, the door was locked up for the evening, all nice and safe. And he was running from the living room where my grandparents were into the hallway, like he said he would do all the time, just playing.
Right.
And he said he ran into the hallway. And as he looked down along the hallway towards the front door, he said he looked up and he saw only described as like a man in black, a figure, a very unusual. I say man in black because that's what people talk about, with the abductions and, after seeing a UFO and things like that. And he said, as he looked up, this unusual humanoid shaped being manifested itself straight through the front door, which was all locked up for the evening. And it tried to beckon him to follow him up the stairs, which was close by. And he said, oh, no, you didn't. About turn and ran back into the front room.
Right.
And confronted my grandparents, who at the time just said, you'd imagine it, as they do with a lot of kids. They just poo-poo it and say, no, you must have imagined what you saw and things like that. And I actually drew, it was in the second book, I actually drew an illustration of what he described to me. And when I showed him, he went, yeah, that's exactly what I saw. Yeah, in that book, yeah. And again, it's within there, and you can see where it manifested through the door. And basically, he didn't know. My father doesn't know what a man in black is. He doesn't know the ufology sort of slang term for that type of a thing. He just told me what he saw at the time, which was, unusual, quite frightening for him as well.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to comment on too. Talking along this line is that this is why I started to wonder. Not only, are they walking through walls, coming out of walls, the EVPs that we get. Some of them sound like they're mechanical. It's
Yeah.
like they're like coming through ripples of water.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's coming through a frequency. It's coming from their frequency into ours, and it's coming through the different barriers to get to our ears. What frequency we can hear on? It's like a radio station trying to tune in, isn't it?
Right, and that's what makes me wonder about some of the stuff. Yeah, it's ghosts of our loved ones, but some of it I think is alien encounters. I really do. Coming through.
Yeah.
Because if they can walk through walls and they have the ability for not to be seen too, because they're in that other dimension, so they could be standing around us all the time and we don't know.
Yeah. And you talk about people that have been abducted, people that have come forward. Anyone can read up on these cases, and most people say the same thing, where they were taken and they actually went through a closed window,
right.
Through the glass or through a wall or up through the ceiling, through the roof, as if it wasn't there. So again, that's very much on par with paranormal, ghosts, spirits. It's all the same thing. It's all, outside of the frequency, and it's whether, I've got a friend, we're talking about Rendlesham Forest, Derek Savory. He lives not far from the forest itself in Rendlesham. And that he goes out there, and sees all kinds of entities and things, very unusual goings on. And he said once he saw a legion of Romans that actually came past on the road. Yeah. But he said the most unusual thing about this is they had no legs. And I said to him, which he knew himself anyway, but I said, well, surely they didn't have any legs because they're coming through on their dimension, their realm, when the road was further down. So they did have legs, you just didn't see them because the road is a lot taller today than it was in the Roman era or whatever. And again, it's just a different dimension bleeding through into ours. And they also say time doesn't exist in that respect. So that could have happened yesterday with the Romans and, literally in conjunction with our world. So, yeah, I think they're very, very, very well connected. They're very well
I think so too.
Netted together, yeah.
I think so too. Jason, I want to thank you for coming on. It was fantastic.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I'd love to have you on, later on down the line. It was really fun. I learned so much from you.
Yeah. No, like I said, it's a pleasure. I love doing these shows because, you can bat around talk about different opinions within ufology. We've got to remember we've all got different opinions. Not everyone's right. That's the thing.
Right. All right, sir. Well, thank you, and have a nice rest of your Halloween, your evening. And I appreciate it, and hopefully we can get you back on sometime.
Yeah, that'll be brilliant. Yeah, you take care.
All right, sir. Thank you. Oh, real quick, how can people find you?
If people want to contact me, regarding a sighting or just information, etc., they can get me on my Facebook page, Ufonly, or just message me. I'm pretty easily contactable. If they want to buy any of the books, the UFO Photo, the Ufology Umbrella, or the UFO Encounters Up Close and Personal, they can get those on Amazon or through Philip Mantle on Flying Disc Press.
Fantastic. All right, sir. Well, you have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. That was super, 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 super. I love talking about UFOs and aliens and all that stuff. And he has a lot of information very well. And I just really appreciate him coming on. Anyhow, well, that's the end of my show tonight. And if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio, and we're just trying to get the word out about our shows. And like I said, if you're still watching from Facebook tonight, be sure to follow and like this program. Just same thing with YouTube. Go ahead, hit that little ghost in the bottom right hand corner and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And Instagram. I'm looking to build up my Instagram, so check it out at Ghosty Gal. Anyway, I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. We got a great guest lined up, and I hope you're having a great Halloween. So I'm going to close this out. So here we go, and I got some contact information for you for Jason and his books and Amazon. Here we go. Websites: Jason Gleaves' YouTube channel, Ufonly, UFONLY, and Jason Gleaves' Facebook page. And again, the books: UFO Encounters, the Ufology Umbrella, and UFO Photo. And as he said, they're available on Amazon. Okay, guys, I will see you tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a great Halloween.